So with the first one, if you'll notice on the board, it's talking about a presidential primary. Your book definition suggests that that's an election in which a party's voters choose state delegates to national convention or to express a preference for their party's presidential nominee. So that's a really long definition, so let's shorten it down. In a presidential primary, two things can happen. So just put down number one. In a presidential primary, put down that we choose state delegates. That's the first one. A delegate, guys, is someone who will show up at a national convention and cast the official vote for the nominee of the presidency. Okay? So number one, we choose state delegates. That can happen in a presidential primary. So far, so good? Then put down number two. The second thing that can happen at a presidential primary is that we we choose a party's presidential nominee. Okay? We choose a party's presidential nomination or nominee. So if I were to ask you on a test or quiz, what two things happen at a presidential primary, you would tell me they either choose delegates or they choose a presidential candidate, or both, right? It could happen both ways. Now, if an individual were to win a primary, does that mean that that individual is the president? No. It just simply means that they have won the nomination to run for president. So that political party is going to let that individual run on their behalf for the office of the presidency. Has everybody got that? So that's the first one. If you'll notice, there's three definitions here, and I've only got two written down at the bottom. The reason I only have two is because this middle one I think is pretty self-explanatory. It says winner take all. Well, if I win in a winner take all scenario, how much of the prize do I get? All of it. Don't matter if I win by one vote or thousands of votes. I get all of it. Winner takes all. That's pretty self-explanatory. The reason we have a winner take all and then the bottom one there where it says proportional representation, that is how states decide how many electoral votes a candidate gets for presidency. Y'all with me? You have to get 270 electoral votes in order to be the president. In a state with a winner take all mentality, if that person, like I said, if me and Cameron's running for president, I beat him by one vote, I get every electoral vote there is. Now, is that really fair to Cameron in a winner take all? No, because he done just as well. He only lost by one vote, but he has absolutely nothing to show for it. Okay? Now, in a proportional representation system, and this is number 13 at the bottom of your paper, I'm going to read it to you and then we're going to simplify it. So, in a proportional representation, it's a system that gives a primary candidate a portion of delegates equal to their percentage of the vote. So let's make this simple. Me and Cameron again are running for the office of the president. We're trying to win the Republican nominee to be the next Republican candidate for president. 10,000 people vote in Virginia. Okay? At the end of the day, I get 8,000 votes. Cameron got 2,000. The vast majority of people want who to be the nominee? Me, right? But Cameron got 2,000 votes. So if we're using a proportional representation system here, of the 10 votes that Virginia has, how many of them does he get? Two, and I would get 8, right? Because it kind of helps him in his way trying to get there too. But I got the majority, therefore I get the most. So beside a proportional representation, put down that you get a portion of the delegates equal to the percentage of the vote. I don't know how to shorten that part, but I would start right here. You get a proportion of delegates equal to their percentage of the vote. Okay? Is everybody with me so far? Yes, no, in between. All right, so now if you'll go back up to the top of this paper, what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about some of the roles of conventions, okay? And you're going to notice there's some more definitions here, okay, like caucus, national convention, platform, keynote address. We're going to use all these in these notes, but we're going to answer the questions for them and then put down what they mean. Does that make sense? So if you go back up to number 1, it says from 1800 to 1824, presidential candidates were chosen by a blank. Okay? There's only 2 ways that a presidential candidate can be chosen. It'll be through a caucus or through a national convention. Now, the way you guys have always seen it done is through a national convention. Okay? Now, from 1800 to 1824, we chose them through, and it's the top word right there, the word caucus. Write that down. And then we're going to define it so you know what it means. So from 1800 to 1824, presidential candidates were chosen by a caucus. Okay? Now, your book definition for a caucus suggests that it's a closed meeting of party members who select delegates to a national convention. So very simply put down, a caucus is when they select delegates to a national convention. And those delegates have promised that they will vote for the candidate that the party has chosen they want to nominate. Okay? So in a caucus, it's when they select delegates to send to a national convention. But prior to 1824, we didn't have a national convention. So we chose our presidential candidate through what they call a caucus. Is everybody with me there? Makes sense? Rhino, you with me over there, brother? Makes sense?
Yeah.
Good deal. All right. Now, moving ahead, if we look at number 2, it says in 1832 that system got replaced. Well, I just told you there was only 2 ways to pick a president. One is through a caucus, the other one is through a national convention. So if we're replacing a caucus, what are we doing in 1832? We're replacing it with what? A national convention. So jot that down. And then I would like for you to write down the definition of a national convention, and we're going to make it simple. This is number 2, correct. And a national convention, that's where it's a meeting where major parties select their presidential ticket. Simply put down, it's when parties select their presidential ticket, who they're going to nominate for president and vice president. Okay? So at a national convention, it's where major parties select their presidential ticket. So a caucus is when they select delegates to choose the presidential candidate. A national convention is where they can select delegates, but it's where they show the world who our presidential nominee is going to be. All right? So, number 3, we're going to mark it out because I'll never ask you that question on a test or quiz, so it's irrelevant. Just mark through number 3. Okay? I showed it the second block today, and after I told them about it, I was like, I shouldn't have done that because it's just something else I got to remember. So it gives them some incentive to listen to these videos, because if they listen to the video, they'll know. They don't need to know number 3. And then drop down to number 4. Number 4 says the procedures for selecting delegates in a primary is governed by state laws and blank. Now again, we choose delegates in a national convention. We send them to a national convention, right? So states show you how you can pick delegates, but also write down party rules. Parties can also have rules or stipulations on how delegates get chosen. All right? So party rules. Now, of those 3 questions that we answered at the top, the biggest idea is I need you to know the difference between a caucus and a national convention. Can everybody do that for me? Caucus doesn't happen anymore. National convention replaced it. Okay? Is everybody with me? Hello?
I have pictures.
Well, I don't want them.
Well, you gotta take them.
Thank you. Okay, so far so good? We good? All right. If you drop down to the next three where it says presidential primaries, we've literally been talking about this for most of the morning or afternoon, early afternoon. So number 5, it says a state's presidential primary can do two things essentially. Well, you already know what they do. You should. I've already told you 3 times what they do. What can happen at a primary? They select what? What is selected at a primary? Talk to me, people. Who they're going to nominate. Okay, so we can put in that second blank in number 5, put down their preference of a candidate. So they choose their candidates, right? Y'all see the second blank in number 5? Put down choose their candidate. What'd you say, Cameron? Yeah. I thought you was actually trying to answer the first part of it. I was like, oh, yes. Got a breakthrough. No breakthrough? No. Who has to cast the official vote for the president, guys? Those what we pick from each state. Well, we don't call them that. We call them something else.
Starts with a D.
Starts with a D. Delegates, right? So, in that first blank, a state's presidential primary can do one of two things. We literally wrote that down at the bottom, if you remember. The first one is to choose delegates. That's the first blank, is to choose delegates. Or to find our presidential candidate, our preference for presidential candidate. So I don't feel like we got to spend an enormous amount of time on that. That's the second time we've wrote that. So do you think you're going to see that again? No. Okay. Keep believing that. The guy turns in papers with no answers.
Pardon me. Did you check and see if
I haven't. I will in a minute. Did you try again?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, number 6. It says a winner-take-all primary has nearly disappeared in favor of what? If we was looking at them on the board, I was comparing that to where they split the votes based on a percentage of the vote you received. What do we call that? It's at the bottom of your paper. If it's not a winner-take-all, what's the other way of doing it? Come on, people. Yes, proportional representation. Put that down. Number 6. Guys, this is just a review of what we were doing. Okay? So proportional representation. And then number 7, the few states that do not hold primaries, believe it or not, some states still don't do primaries. That do not hold primaries, how do they choose their delegates? Guys, this should be easy. There's only 2 ways to choose a delegate. You can either do it at a caucus or what? National convention. So number 7, it's a caucus or convention. Caucus or convention. Is any of that confusing? Pretty straightforward, I hope. Any questions so far? All right, cool. All right, now the last part of this, 8 through 11. A couple of these are on the board, and then the other ones we're just going to have to explain to you. Okay. If you'll notice underneath National Convention, you've got the words platform and keynote address. Number 8 says the blank is the statement of a party's basic principle. That is the word platform. So number 8 is platform. Now, while you're writing this down, listen to what I'm saying. You may hear me say platform or plan. A party's plan or a party's platform. It's the same thing. The platform is the party's plan. Is everybody with me there? So, if you got to put platform/plan there, that's fine. Because you may see it on your test as what is the name of the plan that Republican parties have or whatever. And it would be their platform. Y'all got that? Number 9 says the blank is the speech that is usually given on the first day of a convention. Well, anytime someone's giving a speech at the first day of a rally or anything of that nature, it is called, what is the bottom of your notes there, the keynote address, okay? Most of the time, these politicians try to find someone who is very popular to give this keynote address. Like Hillary Clinton had LeBron James speak at hers in 2016, her national convention. A lot of people probably tuned into that to hear what LeBron James had to say. Now, I don't know if it was a keynote address, but I know he did speak. You know what I'm saying? But the keynote is the very first speech given at the national convention, okay? So it's called the keynote address. And it's usually done by someone fairly popular, well known, all right? And then lastly here, who is nominated? Now, these two are not in your notes, so you're just going to have to listen to me, and you may have to jot down a little bit of extra stuff right here. But number 10 says, a blank president who wants to run again is usually nominated. All right, what do we call the president who has already held the office but is trying to get reelected? Y'all know what that word is? It starts with an I. No, it's not an idiot for some of you looking at me. Does anybody know? You guys ever heard of the word incumbent? You ever heard that said before, incumbent? An incumbent, guys, is somebody who has already held the office and they are trying to regain it. You guys understand that? So, since Joe Biden and Donald Trump are running against one another this year, who is the incumbent president? Trump. Y'all with me? So, number 10, an incumbent president is the one who wants to run again. You spell that I-N-C-U-M-B-E-N-T, incumbent, okay? You will need to know what that word means. So if you need to jot it down, that it's the individual who has already held the office that's seeking re-election, that would be a good idea, okay? And then lastly, number 11, I want you guys to take a stab at this one. It says the greatest number of people who have been nominated for president had previously served as what? So in politics, most of the people that became president, what was their previous job in politics? Does anybody know?
A delegate, a governor.
A governor. Yeah, they were governors. So in number 11, they were governors. What was Donald Trump? He's the exception to the rule. He had no political experience before. You guys know what President Obama was? Before he became president? He was a senator in Illinois. What's that?
Oh, Bush was?
No, that was Obama. Bush was the governor of Texas. Yeah. So they all had some type of political experience. Trump kind of threw that out the window. He's never had political experience. All right? So, with all that being said, does anybody have any questions as far as these notes go? Does that make sense? All right. The last thing I have for you, and you've got about 10 minutes if you want to get started on it. You may finish it. I have put a little mini quiz, I guess you'd call it, under the classwork tab in your Google Classrooms that deals with section 1 and 2. I would like for you to answer those questions and try to get it back to me by tomorrow night. It's due tomorrow at midnight, okay? But it's asking you about all the different roles of the president. You remember I told you I'd show you that chart and you'd have to match them? So that's where that chart came in. But just resubmit it back to me once you finish. Open it in Cami, write on it, and send it to me, and we'll be good to go. But that's due tomorrow, Wednesday, at midnight. Any questions about today's stuff? Cool. All right, that's all I got. So you can work on that for the last 10 minutes of class.